Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy today. 3 must-draft running backs for your 2023 fantasy football teams. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to let me know, drop a like, subscribe to the channel as well. And I think I mentioned this with the wide receivers. I want to make sure I do the same here with running backs. My must-draft guys are going to be players going in the middle rounds. So we're looking at rounds 6 to 10. We'll be talking about some of those guys in those early rounds. We've already talked about some sleepers. We'll do that with some of these early guys in future videos. But want to make sure we cover these middle rounds and some great targets for you guys. So I've got 3. These guys, a couple of them are going very close together. The other one a little bit later. But let's get to the first guy here. One I really can't stop drafting when I'm running my mock drafts, David Montgomery. He's the RB 26 right now in ADP, going in the middle of the 7th round. Last season, he was the RB 23, so definitely was able to outperform what his current ADP is, which is great. Now, on a new team, obviously, with the Detroit Lions, and I think the value for this offense is really pointing towards a guy like David Montgomery being the guy to invest in over Jahmyr Gibbs. So the value is, of course, scoring touchdowns. We saw Jamal Williams do that. He had 17 touchdowns last year. I don't think Jamal Williams is a very talented back either, so there's a lot of guys that could do what Jamal Williams did last season. Definitely don't think that's out of the question for David Montgomery. Now, the question will be whether or not this offense stays as efficient, especially on these inside the 5 carries. They led the league, 38 inside the 5 carries. Of course, led the league by a significant margin too. The Dallas Cowboys were second. I wonder, you'd be wondering what that number is. Dallas Cowboys ran the ball inside the 5-yard line just 27 times. 11 more inside the 5 carries, almost a 30% higher rate of inside the 5 carries compared to the second place team. The Detroit Lions are a team, if you're looking for a running back to add, it's got to be one that can score touchdowns. Sure, receiving profile is always a great lifter of the floor, but what we're looking for when we're drafting guys in the middle rounds, I can mix in a couple guys that we'll talk about later that I think have great floors and can be safe picks. Montgomery's a riskier play because maybe he isn't that guy, but his ceiling is higher. That Jamal Williams type ceiling is there for me when it comes to David Montgomery because Jahmyr Gibbs steps in. Yes, the draft capital being spent. We talked about Gibbs a few videos ago, but he does not have the touchdown profile. Great pass catcher, doesn't have a touchdown profile. He proved that in college. I think he will prove it again here in the NFL. He had just a 21% share of his team's inside the 5 carries at Alabama last year. And even at Georgia Tech, a 3-9 team, a team that was one of the worst in Power 5, he still did not lead their team in inside the 5 carries. Now he comes to the NFL, where there are some of the best running backs in the league. Is David Montgomery the best running backs in the world? Is David Montgomery one of the best running backs in the league? No, but I do think he fits the profile much, much better because Montgomery was top 10 in both broken tackle rate, hit at the line rate, and stuff rate last season. So he's a guy that can competently be, continue to create positive yardage, not lose yardage, break some tackles, give me a better profile for scoring around the goal line. He's posted 49 inside the 5 carries in his career and scoring 17 touchdowns on those. So he's very comfortable in this type of role, and that's what I think the Lions did adding him, is they know what Gibbs can do to improve their offensive performance from a passing perspective. Montgomery can help them continue to do what they did last season on the ground and converting those touchdowns and being one of the best red zone offenses in the league as well. What I do want to do as well, if you guys are looking to play some bets along with your fantasy teams leading into the season, you can bet on season-long player props. And there's one I love, using props.cash to find some of this information, which I'm showing you here. Montgomery's touchdowns are listed at 6.5 for the season. He's gone over this in 2 of 4 seasons, so 50%, nothing crazy here, but this is an offense that struggled a hell of a lot more than the Lions did last season. The Lions were one of the best offenses in the league. He had just 3 attempts inside the 5 last season, so you can look at this data from props.cash to show you how many inside the 5 carries they have, what is it comparable to in terms of when he went over and when he went under. He only had a few, so he went under last season, but in these other seasons you're seeing, there were 3 other seasons he had double digits in all of them. I think if he gets to 15 plus, which would be a career high for him, but in this offense, that's not really a problem. Behind this offensive line, definitely someone that I think can clear this number. This is usually priced at about minus 115, minus 120 at most books. If he gets to 20, which Jamal Williams had 30 last year, 30 inside the 5 carries, his career touchdown rate on inside the 5 carries is right around 35%. That projects him to get over 6.5 touchdowns on the year just on the ground. And yes, his role will be more on the ground than it will be as a receiver, but at least we know he's a good receiving back as well. So if you're looking to play this, I would definitely look to 6.5 on the over if you want access to all this data and all this information for your season-long props, but also during the season. Such a great tool for me betting-wise, especially in the postseason last year. Really helped me when I started to use it. If you sign up props.cash with promo code OwnersBox, 25% off your first month. It'll be just $15. That link will be down below in the description and as well in the pinned comments. Let's get to my second guy. And that second guy is Antonio Gibson. He's the RB36 in ADP. He's going in the middle of the 9th round. So one of my later guys here in these mid-round running backs. He was the RB30 last season in 2022. Here's the deal. I think there's a few things I really love when it comes to changing the offense with Eric Bieniemy. And then I don't trust Brian Robinson. I thought Brian Robinson was just absolutely terrible and given way too much opportunity when it comes to his production. He averaged 3.9 yards per carry, which I want to make sure I make this very clear. It was actually better than Antonio Gibson. He averaged 3.7 yards per carry, but I'll get more into why I think Gibson will be more valuable here in this offense. His EPA was negative 14.4, Brian Robinson, 126th at the position, one of the worst in the league. His 4 yards per carry against light fronts, too, is also awful. Like, guys who run into light boxes tend to be far, far more efficient than 4 yards per carry. So I definitely think that Robinson is a guy that really isn't all that efficient as a back. And even with his size, he had 9 inside the 5 carries. He only turned those into 2 touchdowns. That's not going to cut it either. You want to see that closer to a 50% rate. Now, we have Eric Bieniemy coming in, and last season the Chiefs were 13th in running back target rate. So nothing crazy elite, but still a pretty good number. Sam Howell is the question mark when it comes to targeting running backs and what his frequency will be. But he did work with Javonte Williams and Michael Carter in the same season. They both posted right around 25 receptions on the year, which is great for the college level. Posting 50-plus receptions at the running back position in college is definitely a healthy number. So he's capable of doing that and supporting that type of role for Gibson. Washington as well is, in my mind, I would expect to see a significant increase in passing rate, probably close to 10%. When you look at them last season, they were 52.8% pass rate. The Chiefs last year were 61.5%. Now, they don't have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, but I still think the system and the scheme here from Bieniemy is going to lead to more passing volume. That's a good sign for Gibson. Because you look at Jerick McKinnon, last year he had totaled 56 receptions, 512 yards. I think from weeks... There was a certain span, but I know for sure because I'm looking at Isaiah Pacheco here in a minute. From weeks 10 to 17, or 10 to the end of the year, he was the RB11. Like this is a guy that can, or a coach that can support top tier fantasy output from pass catching backs. And since 2013, only one running back has not finished inside the top 40 at the position when they've posted 50-plus receptions. And we know Gibson is capable of that. Yes, this would be a career high for him, but we're looking at a scheme change here that can certainly benefit him. Ron Rivera's talked about getting him more involved as well so far in this offseason. I think Gibson has a chance to be the better runner. I think he's going to start the year as the RB2, of course, but his receiving volume is there, and it can really elevate his floor. And as the RB36, I think he's in a spot here where he's basically ensured that this is kind of his floor as long as he stays healthy. I mentioned the only running back not to be inside the top 40 was in 2018. It was Theo Riddick. Theo Riddick's role was nothing like Gibson's role. Riddick didn't run the ball pretty much at all for that Lions team. I think Gibson's still going to be involved in that department. So I really like Gibson. The floor there is way too high for me when it comes to where his ADP is to draft him at this spot. I see him definitely more in that front-end RB3 range as opposed to this back-end RB3 range where he's being drafted right now. And the last guy up, like I teased him a little bit, is Isaiah Pacheco. He's the RB27, going right around that, the RB26 going around that similar range to David Montgomery, like we talked about just a little bit earlier. He's going in the middle of the 7th round as well. He was the RB35 in 2022. But here's the deal. When you look at this fantasy finish, there's really no reason to consider any weeks up until week 10. His share of the offensive snaps was far too low to be fantasy relevant whatsoever. He just wouldn't be a guy you'd ever consider playing. Week 10 would be the time when he really arrived and was getting, he didn't have crazy explosive fantasy games like Jerick McKinnon had last year, but he gave you solid production as that flex type of guy. From week 10 to the end of the season, Pacheco was the RB17 in fantasy points per game. Meanwhile, Jerick McKinnon was the RB11 in fantasy points per game. So somehow these two guys both managed to be, for McKinnon, an RB1, but for Pacheco, an RB2. despite the like on the same team, which is of course an offense here that's going to score a lot of points. McKinnon definitely benefited from that, and the receiving volume from Patrick Mahomes, like we talked about. But Pacheco became far more active in the receiving game in the postseason, and I think it's really because his pass blocking improved significantly. I was looking at his grades from PFF. In the tail end of the season, his grades were consistently in the 70s, whereas there were some games where he was his grade was well below 50. Like in some cases, it was below 30. And I think being a better pass blocker is going to keep Pacheco on the field because he's already the guy on the field in early downs. And then as well, like the highlight of his receiving role or his work in the pass game improving and growing was in the postseason. In the conference championship game, he had 6 targets, 5 receptions, and 59 yards. During the regular season, he only had 13 receptions. So he almost had 50% of his receptions in the entire season. And then he did that in just one game in the postseason. So I like his role growing there. He's become more competent in that role. And it's not just the opportunity in the offense he's in, he's also an efficient runner. He averaged 5 yards per carry last year, which was 9th amongst running backs. He also had the 7th lowest stuff rate, so he's definitely moving the line of scrimmage. And then he has the profile that's better suited to score touchdowns inside the red zone. Now, this isn't a team that runs the ball a ton inside the red zone and a ton inside the 5, but he had 10 inside the 5 carries, turned it into 4 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Jerick McKinnon was given 5 and he had 0. So I think Pacheco's really entrenched into the role of scoring touchdowns, and then as well, he's definitely going to be the early downs option. And then I like what we saw at the tail end of the season in terms of his receiving profile. And if we get all those together, he can really destroy this ADP. But at the very least, I think he's a guy that's going to finish more in that like RB20 area, beating this by 6 or 7 spots at least for this season. So I really like Pacheco. Another guy similar to me, like we talked about with Gibson, where the floor is nice and high as long as he stays on the field. So really like Pacheco, definitely someone you want to be targeting. All right, those are my 3 must-draft running backs heading into the 2023 fantasy season. If you guys have any questions, comments on these guys, or any type of running back or any type of strategy when it comes to fantasy football, be sure to drop those in the comments like we did in the last video. I'll be answering some of the ones that you guys have down below. And again, please do help us get to 30,000 subs on the channel. If you enjoyed the content from us, be sure to subscribe. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.